When you think of Martin Luther King Jr., what's the first thing that pops into your head? For most of us, it's probably one single phrase, a line that has really come to define his entire legacy for more than half a century.
Yeah, that one. From his 1963 I Have a Dream speech. It's been absolutely immortalized, right? It's taught in schools, you hear it from politicians, we celebrate it every January, and it paints this very specific picture of a unifying, gentle dreamer.
But what if that image we all know so well has been, well, carefully edited, leaving out the most challenging and maybe the most important parts of his message? Contemporary culture is already on this. In her video for Formation, Beyoncé actually featured a man holding this very newspaper. And get this, the headline reads, "More than a dreamer." It's asking why a revolutionary was recast as an acceptable leader. So this isn't just some dusty historical debate. It's a live conversation, and it's happening right now. So how in the world did a revolutionary become so safe? Well, it happened through a process that scholars and activists have been pointing out for years, the sanitization of Dr. King's legacy.
Sanitization, or sometimes you'll hear it called domestication, is this process of stripping away the radical parts of King's work, his confrontational methods, his really sharp economic critiques, and instead creating a national saint who doesn't make anyone uncomfortable. But here's the thing. In doing so, it creates a powerful tool to undermine modern-day protest.
And this contrast here, it really lays out the two versions of King we're talking about. On one side, you've got the sanitized King, the meek, unifying dreamer who's all about the Southern struggle before 1965. And then, on the other side, you have the radical King, a confrontational critic of the state who is focused on economic and human rights for the entire nation, especially after 1965.
And that brings us to this growing movement that's working to bring that second guy, the radical analyst, back into the spotlight where he belongs.
This timeline really shows you just how radical his thinking became. His early work, of course, was focused on dismantling legal segregation in the South. But after 1965, his focus just exploded. He started confronting what he called the triple evils, calling for a total restructuring of American society and linking the fight against racism at home to militarism abroad.
And his critique wasn't just aimed at his obvious opponents. I mean, even way back in 1963, in his famous letter from a Birmingham jail, he was calling out the white moderate who prefers what he called a negative peace, which is just the absence of tension, over a positive peace, which is the presence of justice. That quote has become an absolute cornerstone for modern activists who are challenging passive allyship.
Okay, so let's break down those triple evils because they are so crucial to understanding his later work. For King, racism wasn't just about individual bigots. It was systemic. It was baked into the system. Poverty wasn't a personal failing, it was a structural problem. And militarism wasn't just about fighting wars overseas, it drained resources and fueled a culture of violence that affected every single one of us.
So how are activists today actually using this reclaimed legacy? Let's take a look at how these big ideas are translating into real-world action.
The strategy is actually pretty simple, but it's really powerful. Activists involved in the #ReclaimMLK movement argue that, look, a day of service, like painting a school, that's fine, but it doesn't challenge why that school needs painting year after year. So they aim to transform the holiday into a day of action that directly confronts injustice, just like King himself did.
And what does that look like? It looks like disruptive, nonviolent direct action. We've seen things like freeway blockades in Oakland, die-ins, marches that go way beyond just symbolic gestures to make concrete demands, like divesting from systems they see as oppressive and investing that money back into communities. As one activist put it, that moment of inconvenience is actually the turning of the wheels of progress. And hey, this isn't just an American thing. This fight over King's legacy, it's a global one, and it's being adapted to fight all sorts of local battles. So in the US, reclaiming the radical King is about justifying confrontational protest, right? It's a pushback against people who say, oh, King wouldn't have done that. But in parts of Western Europe, it's a totally different ballgame. Over there, King's global fame is a tool to shatter national myths of colorblindness and to force a conversation about their own erased colonial histories and local Black resistance. The British activist and author Rainey Eddo-Lodge just nails it here. She points out how the sanitized King is used to shut down tough conversations about race in Britain. So for them, reclaiming him means using his challenging words to force that very conversation. And it's a similar story in the Netherlands, a country that often really prides itself on tolerance.
Activists there use King's legacy to expose the deep roots of systemic racism and to fight back against a kind of colonial amnesia, this tendency to ignore the nation's history and the slave trade and the effects that still linger today. So, what's the bottom line? Why does this fight over the memory of one person matter so much? Right here, right now.
This is the crucial part. This is not just a history lesson. For activists from Chicago to Amsterdam, reclaiming a historical figure is a strategic move. It connects their modern struggles to a legacy that has enormous moral authority, and that gives them a powerful platform to demand change in the present.
Ultimately, this whole battle for Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy proves that memory isn't static. It's not just something in a textbook. It's an active process. The version of our heroes we choose to celebrate literally sets the boundaries for what we believe is possible. So, are we building with the comfortable dreamer or with the relentless revolutionary? That's the question this whole movement leaves us with.